Hello, this is the Million Vegan Grandmothers podcast, and I have Gerard Bishop, the founder and the executive, president, or I guess you don't really call it president when we're talking about foundations, but of the World Preservation Foundation. And when we look at the World Preservation Foundation, we see this amazing discovery, which we all are going to know about very, very soon, because that's the way the world is heading towards, is that a plant-based diet, eliminating meat and fish and chicken and dairy from our diets, allows us to preserve the earth very, very quickly. So I am so honored to have you, Gerard.
It's a great pleasure, and thank you, Tammy, for inviting me on your program. I've done a bit of work for the World Preservation Foundation. It sounds great, but it's just a handful of us doing voluntary work. We were involved quite heavily backgrounding the documentary Eating Our Way to Extinction. So my job as a previous scientist, my job there was to make sure that all the facts were checked and the science was scrutinized. So yes, that's based on non-controversial science. It's all peer-reviewed government reports and so on. And that's important to get right these days. So many people can shoot off their mouths, express opinions, and people think it's truth, but sadly not. So we're very careful to look at the truth, and the truth is just mind-boggling at the moment. Our planet and the people on it are in grave peril. I don't know if you've heard of the planetary boundaries work that's been done at the Copenhagen Resilience Centre, but it's now determined that there's 9 systems that support life on Earth, and we've overstepped at least 5 of those. And if we overstep any one of those, it actually endangers all life on Earth. So we are in a pretty perilous situation. I mean, I'm normally optimistic, and there are solutions. There are some very, very effective and optimistic solutions for all of it. But unless we change course rapidly, we are headed for a very different world for future generations. I look at my kids, and the youngest is 6 months old, and I think, what will this planet be like? When I grew up, it was all rosy and shiny, and we could take what we liked from nature. We had an array of jobs, whatever you want to do. Money wasn't a problem. The world was flourishing. But now it's very different, and we can get to a situation where it will flourish again, but we've got to change. And the first is the attitude towards planet Earth. This is our mother. This is what gave us life, and we are trashing it. So if you like, one of the planetary boundaries that we've most overstepped is biodiversity loss. Now, that sounds rather dry and academic, but biodiversity loss is, what about the life on Earth? How are we going with the life on Earth? Well, the latest, each year, WWF looks at the global footprint and looks at populations of wild animals. And it appears that populations of animals that were here before humanity got started have shrunk by 69%.
Wow.
So we've killed off more than 2/3 of life on Earth. And that's rather frightening. If you look at the mammals, the vertebrates that breathe and have kids rather than eggs, if you look at the mammals, the wildlife on Earth, the mammals from mice up to elephants and whales, that's just 4% of the biomass, of the weight of mammals on Earth. Humans now 30%, and by far the greatest weight of animal is the animals that we breed to eat. And because these animals that we breed to eat are bred for extreme growth and productivity, they actually consume not twice as much as what humans do, but 5 times as much. Mm-hmm. So the pressure on our resources, on the biomass produced on planet Earth, is extreme, and we've pushed it way past what is sustainable. And the possibility, what happens is when you push it past what is sustainable, you can do it for a while. It's like overspending on your credit card. And you can do it for a while. You can get another credit card and max that out, paying off the last credit card. But eventually it catches up with you and you become bankrupt or you go to jail. But I'll just give you an example of what's the logical conclusion for the biodiversity and the way we're pushing it. We've taken from nature. We've considered nature to be our resource. You know, my stepfather, his job was cutting down the best trees in the forest. Basically, he made quite a handsome living out of cutting down red cedar in Australia. And then later on, he got a crew of people and they started deforestation. So he was doing that not to trash the environment. He was doing that to put food on the table, to give jobs to people, to provide food for a growing country, to feed the nation. And it was lauded. It was the best thing to do. It's called development. But now we realize that we've way overstepped development. And so if we keep trashing nature, it will come back to bite us. And it has in many ways. One of them is the pandemics. We've pushed nature into a corner. When wild animals get stressed, as they do when we push it into a corner, that stress increases the viral load in their systems dramatically. And when we have close contact with these animals, that's when the viruses start to jump. So many of these viruses, Ebola, 2/3 of all communicable diseases are zoonotic diseases. In other words, they've come from animals. Mm-hmm. So we've pushed nature into this corner. And by doing that, we're actually endangering our own lives. And I'll give you an example of that. The Amazon jungle, rainforest, is the most biodiverse, the largest rainforest, the most biodiverse place on Earth. Now, what's happened is that, it's got a really nice cycle. This is how it demonstrates, if you like, how forests make rain. What happens is that the Amazon River runs from west to east, and there's another what they call river in the sky that runs the opposite direction. So all the evaporation and from the rainforest goes up into the air, along with aerosols that form rain droplets. So what happens is this enormous amount of water, equal in volume to what's in the river, is in the air above, and it rains and it cycles. But this river in the sky, it doesn't just rain on the Amazon. It then turns south and rains on the whole of Brazil and a few other countries. And this rainfall has been so predictable and so good that Brazilian agriculture is incredibly productive. They have 2 and sometimes 3 rain-fed crops per year. So they have an incredibly productive agriculture. But what's happened is that we've cut down 20% of the Amazon rainforest. And of course, you know what that's for. 85% of it has been for grazing animals or for crops like soy and maize to feed Europe and China's animals. China, it's pigs. But scientists have been saying for some time that the Amazon, because it generates its own rainfall, there is a threshold beyond which that rainfall generation will stop. And scientists have been saying, well, this is about 20%. And right now we have cut down about 20% of the Amazon. And in the last 10 years, we've had the first ever droughts in the Amazon. What has been predicted is happening. So when we talk about biodiversity loss and we talk about ecological collapse, that's exactly what we're seeing here. And they're saying now that the majority of the Amazon could revert to open savanna because it just won't have the rainfall to support the rainforest as it is now, which is a tragedy for all the animals that live in that rainforest. The 70% of the biodiversity on Earth lives in forests. And I'll give you an example of my personal experience. You're just gobsmacked when you see it up close. You look at the deforestation process, and they've invented a really good one in Australia, really effective. And what it is you get two of the biggest bulldozers you can imagine, D11s, D9s, maybe 50 to 100-ton bulldozers, and you have a chain between them, and that chain, a huge chain. Each link of the chain is more than you can lift. So this is a massive chain, and they charge ahead with the chain between them, and they just pull the trees over. They literally rip the trees out of the ground, and it's called tree pulling. And even trees that are 20, 30 meters tall, even almost 100-foot tall, they just get smashed. And the noise is unbelievable. The roar of the dozers, the clank of the chain, the smashing, cracking, banging, thudding of all the trees when they're coming over. And the wildlife go crazy. Particularly in Australia, we've got these cockatoos and corellas that have a piercing shriek, and that noise just goes straight through you. It's deafening. It's haunting. It's awe-inspiring how we can trash nature so readily. So that's my experience, and I see that, and my job actually was to monitor that. My science team, we found over 30 years we had an average of 10 square kilometers per day. That's about 2,500 acres per day being trashed for grass-fed industries, mainly beef. So 2,500 acres per day, and this is current. This is right now. This has been happening for the last 40 years, and it's the same. It's about half the area of what's happening in the Amazon, but not as dense a forest. It's a more open woodland, but still. What happens to the wildlife when you see this? Wildlife is territorial. It depends very much on food. And so when you take away the habitat, as they do, 2,500 acres a day, the wildlife doesn't just get up and walk to another area of untouched bush, because there's other communities that live there. When you take away the habitat for the wildlife, the wildlife dies. That's it. Birds have a bit better future if they can survive eating something of what's replacing it. Like if they can eat some grain, they're okay, of the crops. But most of the wildlife doesn't survive. It just dies. And this is exactly what we've done over all these years of deforestation. We've actually there's a lot of different estimates because, and my game was remote sensing, satellite mapping. And so it's really hard to get a handle on this, but we've taken out about 3 trillion trees so far. And of all the forests on Earth, only about 1/8 is untouched. In other words, a lot of it's degraded, a lot of it's logged and recovering or thinned, as they call it. And so we're on the way to destroying all the forest on Earth. And what's going to happen is the ecological collapse. Forests generate rain. So rain is which dictates our food. You know, the food growing areas on the planet depend totally on rain. So if we change the rain cycles like we are doing by changing the vegetation, then we are endangering ourselves. So we're not immune from taking from nature, taking what we want, trashing those trees. And it's funny because like one of the last trips I did, I was a management in the end, but I got out on a few of these trips, and we stayed in these little communities, and you stay in, I think it was the Mount Coolin Hotel, a little old timber hotel, 100 years old, and we were known as the tree police, the government. So you turn up in a government vehicle and they look sideways at you. And we got in, it was just about dark, and we got into the main public bar to have a drink, and the conversation stops. And it was really hard to get out of there because they were ganging up on us. But in the end, you know, we talk. But in the end, I had this woman say to me that they've got a farm. It's a family farm, but they put so much into it that they have a huge debt on this farm. And the only thing they can do to service that debt is to make sure they maximize their productivity. And the only thing that land is good for, it's good for growing trees, in my opinion, but if you're a farmer, the only thing the land is good for is growing beef cattle. So she was crying. She was saying, look, this is all the agronomists, all the government people, all the you know, the industry experts are telling us we have to clear the trees or we can't afford to repay our loan. So where have we got? Where has humanity? We backed ourselves into a corner so tight that we've got to trash the environment to service our loan. You know, it's back there somewhere. She knows, she was crying. Back there somewhere, she knows that you can't keep trashing the environment forever. It comes back to bite you. Mm-hmm. So that's where we are right now on planet Earth. The Amazon is not alone. The rain patterns have totally changed in Australia because we've taken out a lot of trees, but we're not alone either. All around the world, the rain patterns have changed, and rain equals food for us humans. So, yeah, biodiversity loss. It sounds it sounds academic, but it's really our life. You know, we depend on those bees, on those butterflies, on those, all the animals that keep these ecosystems alive and functioning. It's a pretty sad position that we're in at the moment.
So you said you still feel hope. And beyond hope, you still feel the possibilities of what humanity is capable, you know, in some of the, in some of the traditions that I'm involved in, there's this understanding that we're in the greatest awakening on planet Earth, and that for every, extreme, there's the counter, the counter to that. And I would love it if you could share a little bit about, the passion it gives you to be a grandfather, and and the remembering of the joy. They're here and they're not thinking about, well, I might only be here for 10 years. They're just enjoying themselves, and really, and it's up to us, big people, to make sure they understand how they can help us clean up the mess, right? So are your grandchildren plant-based or vegan yet? Or how does that work? Yeah, right.
Yeah, they eat vegan whenever I'm around because I cook. But yeah, they're vegan a lot. Both of my sons' families, I've been pushing them gently, and not so gently at times, but yeah, they're on their way. They're future vegans. Yeah, but look, where does hope come from for the future? Exactly. You look at the young kids; they've got wisdom beyond their years. They know right from wrong, and thankfully, the old guys' generation is over, or coming to an end. So hopefully the youngest ones, but the future on planet Earth can turn around so quickly. And this is why I love the work of Salish Rao. He's such a visionary, and his work with climate is so profoundly different. Everyone in the climate change community deals within this very narrow envelope, this very narrow lens that is the IPCC agreed rules. He doesn't. He looks at the bigger picture. And for example, the deforestation is accounted for in the IPCC records as a net accounting. So they take the emissions from deforestation and they subtract the amount of carbon dioxide that's soaked up by other vegetation that's growing or regrowing on managed lands. And but if you separate that, if you take out the full amount of the deforestation and the full amount of the revegetation sequestration, and add that to the untouched, the intact lands, you find that right now, the regrowth that is happening, as well as the drawdown that's happening on intact lands, is about 85% of all the fossil fuel emissions. Mm-hmm. So, we're very close. We're very close to reversing all the fossil fuel contribution. We're not close at all to reversing the deforestation emission. And when you go back, as Salish Rao does, you go back in time to before the Industrial Revolution, which is when the United Nations rules start, you find that the cumulative emissions from deforestation are greater than all the fossil fuel emissions. So this is amazing. This turns the whole climate change scenario on its head. It's saying that the main game for climate change has always been trees, and it always will be, not fossil fuels, because fossil fuels release this other stuff, as Salish so beautifully puts, that aerosols that cool just as much as the carbon dioxide warms. So you can almost set aside the climate impact of fossil fuels. It's only there was a paper came out about 6 months ago that saw that fossil fuels, if you count the cooling as well as the warming, fossil fuels have caused just 20% of global warming. Who would have thought that? I mean, you ask anyone, they'll say, what's the main cause of global warming? They'll say fossil fuels and carbon dioxide. But no, most of that 20% is actually caused by methane because methane doesn't have the co-emitted cooling aerosols. So this is astounding. You know, methane itself has caused more than half a degree of warming. And so if you were a politician looking at addressing climate change, methane should be number one, but it's not, because of the way the IPCC and the United Nations have framed the rules. And this is why I love Salish. He's trashed the rules, thrown them out the window, saying, okay, what's really going on? Trees. It's always been trees. It always is trees. An example, a small example. We're often told that a molecule of carbon dioxide that's emitted from our tailpipe of our car, it stays in the atmosphere for centuries. But the isotope studies tell us that every molecule of carbon dioxide is recycled through the vegetation every 2 years. So in 2 years, we are breathing. The earth is breathing. It's taking in the carbon dioxide and back out again. All we've got to do is increase the lungs a bit to increase that breathing, to increase the drawdown of carbon dioxide. And that won't take much. In fact, if we just ditch red meat and dairy, that frees up all the grazing lands of the world, which is actually enough to rewild 40% of the planet. So that'll solve the carbon crisis, the climate crisis. That will solve the biodiversity crisis, because to animals, habitat is everything. Take away the habitat, take away the animals, they die. So there's so many other things. The water cycles will change, the rainfall will change, the extremes. We can and there's studies that show we can actually cool the planet. We can do that just with methane. Forget about carbon dioxide. Just with methane, we can cool the planet if we slash those emissions enough. A major chunk. And we can do that easily. So we can cool the planet, and we can fix the long term of the planet. And we can bring back nature. We can, even if we keep industrial ag, if you look at crops, the world's crops, there was a lot of talk about the Colorado River and where that water goes. Well, most of the water goes to agriculture, about 70%. And of that, about 70%, 85% goes to agriculture. Of that, 70% goes to feed crops for animals. So, if you, even California is incredibly productive. It's a salad bowl. It's the producer of fruit and veg for the whole of the US. It's amazing. And that's based on the Colorado River, snow-fed and so on. So if we stop sucking out 70% of that 85%, works out at just over half the water of the river, you can still have that very productive other agriculture, almonds, you name it, no worries at all. And by doing that, of course, you're about halving the amount of nitrogen you're pouring on. So the dead zones in the ocean are going to start clearing up, etc. So the impact of putting aside this incredibly inefficient. People talk to me about efficiency or waste in food, and it's incredible. I mean, chicken is the most efficient converter from feed to meat. And eating chicken, it's the equivalent of lining up 5 plates of pasta in front of us, throwing out 4 of them and eating 1. So the waste there is, well, what can we justify that at all? It's incredibly wasteful. We've got to reverse that wastefulness. We've got to move away from animal products. We've got to move to the basics, which is the healthy stuff. And we've got to have respect for our planet, respect for all life on Earth, so that wildlife can reclaim the land, can rise back from that 4% of the mammals that it is now, back to something that's healthy, and we can do it because it's so easy. In fact, nature is busting to do it, but each year we've got two systems, right? Two systems that prevent nature from coming back. The first is sheep. They're incredible. They'll, as soon as a sapling pokes its head up, chomp, it's gone. Scotland is an example of that. The highland clearance, they took out all the trees for sheep and put sheep on it, and now the sheep take out everything. So Scotland's name used to be Caledonia. Caledonia means forest, that's the name. So it went from total forest to almost totally denuded. And that's because of the sheep. And they are rewilding some areas, but they work hard and they're strengthening their defenses to keep the sheep out. The other thing we use is fire. The sheep are used in the temperate regions. Fire is used in the tropics where you get a strong wet and dry season. And in the dry season, they always burn, and the burning gets rid of the old dead grass, which is not unpalatable. They don't like it so much. It creates new green pick when it does rain, and it also kills off the ticks, and it also kills off any woody weeds. Don't you love these terms, woody weeds? It stops the forest from recovering. So the forest is aching to bounce back as long as we get rid of the sheep and cattle and stop burning. In fact, there was one paper that said Africa is burned so much, if they stop burning, half of the sub-Saharan Africa could revert to forest because it's high rainfall. So, we have so modified this world, we have totally changed this world, and we can totally change it back again. It's just a matter of choice. I do have, I do think that humans are slow, but not stupid. So we will get it in time. We will get it. And there's so much information out there, so much science backing this up now, that it's become, you can't hide it anymore. And even though a lot of the science community is trying hard, very hard, to ignore Salish Rao, they will in time get with the program.
Thank you, Gerard. And, talking so much about the trees and that being such a huge part of your work for multi-decades, it's just to, let the listeners know this isn't an invitation to start eating fish, because the oceans have been incredibly depleted. It's the call to go completely plant-based, and which is so easy, and organic, veganic, if we can, as close as we can, because we know the chemicals that are being used in industrial, commercial food, and getting really close to our food, whether it's sprouting and getting our grandchildren involved. My grandson said to me the other day, Oma, do you remember I've been making green juice with you since I was a baby? He's reminiscing at 6. And so in fact, we can make, as grandparents, letting the world know we're here, that we're ferocious, and hopefully, Gerard, you're going to join the Million Vegan Grandmothers. Sailesh is one of us. It's not just the grandmothers. We're a group of grandparents and grandchildren that are saying we're joining forces to let the world know that our ferocious love for these people is unstoppable. And to let them know, Sailesh says that it is his granddaughter that fuels him. That allows him to never feel discouraged or worn out. And I know that's true for me. If I need a little upgrade and I'm feeling a little overwhelmed with the world, I go out in the trees or I go see my grandchildren. and I live in an aspen forest, so they seem to regenerate pretty quick here. They're quite beautiful, beautiful way. So any final words, Gerard, on, the future, what we can imagine creating and helping our grandchildren with?
Yeah. Well, that's it. It's looking to the future. It's looking beyond our problems right in front of us, and they are many. Mm-hmm. Social problems, financial problems, all of those things. We can get to a world where kids have good, nourishing food, healthy food, where we won't have the burden of hospital medical care like we need now, where we won't be controlled by the big corporations. Big meat very effectively put the kibosh on the climate talks. They've had an extremely high impact on the climate talks, but the voices are being heard. The voices are coming through, and we've got to stay positive. And I think. I think it's happening. There's a big project called Project Drawdown, and Jonathan Foley, he heads that up, and he's done a lot of different sorts of work, and he's a scientist basically. But I love what he said one time in a talk that he gave. He said things happen very, very, very slowly, and then all at once. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's happening here. The message will sink in very, very, very slowly, but people will get it all at once, because it's becoming increasingly clear. Like most people have experienced the floods, the fires, the impact of the mad climate that it is now. And there's a town not far from where I live here, and the Lord Mayor was being interviewed about the most recent flood, which took out most of this town centre. And she said, if these are 1 in 100-year events, I must be 500 years old. So that's what it is. It's affecting people in that way. And the penny is dropping. People are being affected. People are realizing that, there's still people homeless from the last floods here. It affects us, the community, greatly. We can't ignore it. So that will sink in, and we'll develop ears, and we'll look for solutions that are already out there, thanks to so many people, such as the vegan grandmothers, and Salish Rao, the climate healers, and Eating Our Way to Extinction, and the many other informations, and the many other documentaries that have been made, the many people working tirelessly, the doctors, the veganic doctors, the new Lord Mayor of New York. How good is that? Education for doctors. Wow, what a crazy idea. Loving it. But that's it. It's happening. It may not be as fast as we want it, but if enough of us work together, we can get there. And I'm very confident that we will. And thanks to, all the good work such as yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gerard, for this time. And here we are for our grandchildren. And it's kind of a place that gives us great strength, but also great love. And a little shout out to all the grandchildren out there that are holding space for what we're going to do in the next, well, maybe even in the next 3 years. Sailish's vision of a vegan world 2026, that half of the world will be vegan by that point. And I know Will had a date, Dr. Will Tuttle had a date also somewhere near that time that we would see way more vegans. And it has been a slow movement. I think it really, was named in the 40s, 50s, veganism, and very, very small percentage of people became vegan since then, but it's increasing quicker than it's ever been. And so that's a very hopeful thing. Well, thanks again for the time and this opportunity to interview you.
Thank you so much, Tammy. It's been a great pleasure.
Right, thank you.